She is Dawn Euer. She is an attorney, of course, out on the island, as we say here in Little Rhodey. But she's been much more than that, and much more than just a Senate elect. She's been a civil rights advocate. She was a fundamental player in the successful game for marriage equality here in the state. Dawn doesn't realize it, but the first time I believe I ever spoke to her was as a guest on WPRO when she was engaged in seemingly endless arguments, pointing out rightfully that the demise of Western civilization would not, in fact, take place when people were simply allowed the dignity to marry and engage in lifelong relationships with whom they love, as opposed to that which was dictated by a failed state. She's an activist in the election arena. We'll discuss a little bit about that tonight. She was a vital force in the fight against the expansion of Newport casinos and gaming, to which, when the first time I became acquainted with her work on, I'll call it a professional basis. And now she is Rhode Island's newest senator-elect. Dawn Euer, welcome for the first time to the coalition.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and congratulations on your win. We've only got about a little bit of time because you managed to squeeze time in between appointments tonight. So I only want to talk about the election a little bit, but
Yeah.
it was certainly a surprise to some, not to all, that Senator Pavley decided to step down as the Senate president. She had another opportunity. She took it, and it created a scrum for one of the few open seats in the last few election cycles. You had a very strong field of candidates on the Democratic side that you worked with. One of whom has been a frequent guest on the coalition. You took that race, and then what were the issues that you spoke to in terms of your victory in the race last week? What was it that you communicated to the people of Newport and Aquidneck Island that gave you such an overwhelming victory?
Well, I think, you highlighted some of the experience that I've had on the ground working on many different issues. And I think that, over the course of both campaigns, I was able to talk about just my commitment to the community and my commitment really to the individuals in the state. So I talked a lot about wanting to use my voice as an activist and as an advocate to really be a voice for Newport and Jamestown. Mm-hmm. So I think really that experience, really run as an important aspect to a lot of voters. And I also talked a lot about my experience working with small businesses as an attorney, I working with nonprofits and small businesses, and some of the challenges trying to navigate state regulations as something that I wanted to focus on in my time up at the State House.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, if you will, speak to the current state of the Newport, I'll call it the Aquidneck Island community, because it's a very complicated arrangement. In one sense, folks are most familiar with it as a tourist destination spot. On the other hand, you've got a very, very strong defense and defense support community out there, and then you've got a variety of entrepreneurs looking for the island lifestyle. Yet some at the same time would allege that Newport is seen as sort of an ATM for the rest of Rhode Island, an argument that was made very often during the battle against the expansion of casino gaming. What's your take on that? What is the state of the Newport economy right now?
Yeah, I think we're very reliant on the tourism economy and the defense industries, as you mentioned. And I think most of all, we have a ton of small businesses down here. So really, and I'm not talking small in like the 30-person. I'm talking, 2 to 10 employees, and that's an even different. That's an even different sector than somebody that's going to have like a 50 to 100, business. So, oftentimes when you have small businesses like that, it's your neighbors, it's friends and families. I can go walk to the coffee shop and I know the owner of the local coffee shop and that he's been working hard to, build up a franchise. So now he has gone from 1 location to 3 locations. But, he lives around the corner from where I used to live in the 5th Ward. And, it's everyday folks trying to get by and trying to deal with how it seems that everything is increasing in cost. So trying to figure out how do you make ends meet when your revenue streams are kind of staying the same or stagnant, and your wages are stagnant, but everything seems to be getting more expensive.
Mm-hmm. What are your, and we're going to touch on the P word in a little bit. There's some sort of baseball team that's and I know you want to I know you want to clear the air on that. But what are your legislative priorities going into this term? You've got an abbreviated term in one sense, but at the same time, folks are very much going to be paying attention to what you have to say because of the long-term involvement you have in the community.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things too around my campaign and that I truly believe in is that democracy works when we're all involved.
Mm-hmm.
The more people that are involved, and it goes beyond just voting. I mean, people need to get involved and weigh in, come to hearings at the Senate, come to hearings in their local communities, making sure that you're staying in touch with what's going on and having that everyday involvement. So because of my real commitment to that, I do think it's important for us to look at some voting access measures. Mm-hmm. And I know we did a lot during our campaign to make sure that we were giving an opportunity for folks to vote who hadn't previously voted. So I think there's some things that I'd love to work with the Board of Elections and Secretary of State on to make sure that we are really providing the opportunity for folks to vote. That's the big problem in this country is the low voter turnout, and mm-hmm. we need to do more and make sure that we're analyzing the system to make sure that people have access. Mm-hmm. And then I also, I've already talked about small business. That's a really big passion of mine. I think it's really important that we're streamlining regulations, process, procedure, and making it clear so folks know kind of where to start, what are the regulations. I was just talking to somebody today about some inspection that they had gotten they didn't know that they were required to do, and then how much it costs. So things like of that nature I'd like to take a look at and be able to kind of streamline, make stuff easier for folks. And also our seniors, I want to look at, there was conversation during the campaign trail about, seniors' retirement benefits, the taxation levels for seniors, seniors living on a fixed income are trying to just get by and survive. And so we need to make sure that we're looking at that as well. So those are kind of just three areas. I've got a lot of things that I think about. But I think those, those are big enough pieces of the puzzle for me to focus on in a one-year term.
At what point should the state of Rhode Island government make itself more accessible to the people on Aquidneck Island? What I mean by that is, certainly, and I've met some of the local politicians there, and I think particularly Lauren Carson, I think she does a wonderful job of and her and I won't agree on everything politically, but I think clearly there's someone who has a high level of constituent service. But at the same time, what I sense in talking to people out on the island, there's almost a political isolation that takes place. You've got, cities like Providence, Pawtucket, Cranston, and Warwick seemingly taking up all the oxygen in the room. At some point, should the State House consider having open debate, testimony, meetings, and things out on the island to encourage people in Newport and Aquidneck Island to engage with the state more?
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be a great idea. I like what Lauren does is she does her constituent meetings on a pretty regular basis, mm-hmm. Where she's able to take her perspective of things and get some feedback from her constituents. I want to do something similar to that, but I think I know we're going to talk about the P word in a minute, but they're doing, for example, they're taking the Fossox testimony on the road. And I definitely would like to see more of that. I think that's a great idea because, definitely I know people who live on the island, who've lived on the whole island their entire life, and whether or not, folks make a joke about needing to pack a lunch, but folks are really terrified of those bridges. Mm-hmm. So I think it's incumbent upon folks in government to make government accessible, to make it easy for everyday folks to interact. So
Right.
yeah, that's definitely something I want to work on too.
Right, because when you looked at two issues that to me were fundamental to Rhode Island's business structure, were of course the reorganization of the various convention bureaus, and and the
Yeah,
resources that they received and how they received them, and also were some of
yeah,
the taxes that were directed literally at the small bed and breakfast, the small hotels. Both of those issues are
yeah,
critical to Aquidneck Island, yet at the same time they were largely dictated to them by their overlords, my
yeah,
word, not yours, here on the mainland. And let's be blunt. I mean, my travels with this show and some of the political things I've been involved in the last year or two have brought me to parts of Rhode Island that I might not have been otherwise. And when I look at, and I recently visited Westerly and spent a couple days down there I've driven through 1,000 times, but it's different when you're meeting someone down there. I would argue that in many cases, Aquidneck Island and Westerly have done one whole hell of a lot better jobs of running their own affairs than the people who are actually running the state or running the towns on the mainland that seem to be, again, my words, not yours, acting as sort of a vacuum for all the oxygen into the room. I think, quite frankly, we could learn a lot from what folks have done out on the island and down in the deepest parts of South County. Because if they've been successful, it would seem like it's almost in spite of the best efforts of what goes on up here in Providence. So the P word. I know there's been a lot of speculation. Right now, I think there's a number of legislators who are sorting out their feelings. From a personal perspective, my involvement in the Libertarian Party's involvement, we're going to encourage them to sort out their feelings and make them a little bit more public. But I know you want to address the issue head on. So what are your thoughts about stadium subsidies, about the Pawtucket Red Sox, the deal, quote unquote, that we've been offered by what I call the Billionaire Baseball Boys Club? What are your thoughts? Where do you come from as a new leader in the state?
Well, so the interesting thing about having a special election and campaigning right in the middle of a session is that I got to ask a lot of these questions over the course of the campaign. So I've actually talked about the politics on the campaign trail a lot, and I'll tell you that my constituents do not have an appetite for subsidizing a stadium.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to support that perspective, and I agree with that perspective. I think that when we're facing budget shortfalls, that we're unable to provide social services, and we have the challenges that we have in our regular infrastructure with our roads and bridges. I think that I can't support supporting that money for the PAWS Act. But I think the interesting thing about the proposal, I'd like to one of the things I do want to work on too is thinking about small business and access to capital.
Mm-hmm.
Which is something that actually is part of their proposal about floating a bond. But if we can look at ways that, and I think that was the same thing with the 38 studios that a lot of people talked about, is like, what could we do with those funds if they were spread out to our small businesses?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think that's and that's, again, like I said, I just had the benefit of a campaign where I got to talk at length this issue with constituents, and I think people are really, they're wanting to make sure that we're investing our public tax dollars into public infrastructure, roads, bridges, schools. We need to spend money rebuilding. A lot of schools have challenges, including here on Aquidneck Island. We've got a high school locally and in Newport and Middletown that are in need of serious construction. So.
Right. I mean, is there, this is kind of the T-ball of political questions, but
yeah,
it's my opinion that, and we just discussed it with our last guest, that in a recovering mill town like Pawtucket, and that's by no means me a degradation of their efforts or their work or their ethic, because I think what's happening in the restaurant and the craft brewery community there is nothing less than astonishing. It's capitalism really at its best, because so much of it's organic. But what do residents really take pride in? Rooting for laundry, as our last
Mm-hmm.
guest put it, in a baseball team, or taking their children to a school that's safe and provides a great education and a potential way out in some cases of difficult economic circumstances. What do they have more pride in a community that's not boarded up, or strip malls that are not abandoned, or a baseball team. I mean, I'm going to ask you, and I'm not going to put you on the spot, but I'm going to ask you to advocate for that argument, because I think people in Pawtucket and to a large degree, I think the mayor, I think he's wrong. I think his heart's in the right place. I think he's on the wrong side of history with this. I think he genuinely wants best for the city of Pawtucket. But what I would ask you, because you are such a convincing voice here in the state, to advocate for a respect for the taxpayer, a respect for the residents of Pawtucket, and the needs that are real to them and their families. Not this imagined fantasy about a sports team somehow coming in and rescuing them, when we all know that it's a lie. That's what I would ask you, is to continue to show that same respect that you've shown for the folks that you've advocated on in the past, whether it be the citizens of Newport with their intense desire to eliminate casino gambling in the community, with folks who fought a far too long a battle for marriage equality that you advocated so effectively for. I'm hoping that you'll be that same voice in the state Senate when this madness comes up in this special session, because you're literally going to get tossed from the frying pan right into the fire, aren't you, on this side?
Yes, yes, I am.
There's no honeymoon period here. You don't get a month or two off to just do research, or this is as real as it gets.
Yep, absolutely. Well, and yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, that came across loud and clear to me through talking. I knocked on thousands of doors over the course of the campaign, and I think the sense that people have is that they really want us focusing on economic development in a way that, again, helps the moms and pops. I think that there is an appetite for looking at, big picture. We do need, a healthy economy is going to have a wide range of employers. So we need big anchor, big corporations to provide those kind of bigger revenues. And then you want some mid-sized businesses, and then you want some small businesses. That's what a healthy economy looks like. So if we're, looking at that from the State House view, and I think it's really important how, that's the big picture view, but how we get there is very important. And, I've heard that message loud and clear from my constituents, that they just don't have the appetite for this type of thing.
Excellent. Last question again. Joining us is Dawn Euer. She just was elected to the Rhode Island State Senate. She's representing a significant portion of Aquidneck Island in a special election where she replaced Senate President Deborah Paiva-Weed. Have they given you committee assignments, or do you have a heart's desire, or where do you think that'll end up? Any idea yet?
Well, you know what? I just got my office keys yesterday, and I get sworn in on Tuesday, and then I think all of that will kind of come into being shortly after. And I'm going to try to keep my constituents. I'm still trying to figure out the best way to keep in touch with everybody, but I imagine in between, some newsletters and some social media, because it's really important for me to keep everybody updated and make sure that I'm communicating as openly as possible with all the developments as I get up there. So I'll let you know.
Great. Well, the door, if you will, the virtual door is open here anytime. I hope some Friday night you'll come into studio, if you will. I know you squeezed out at the last minute some time from us in a very hectic schedule in the run-up to your inauguration and first Senate session. But the door is open here. Feel free to use us as a mouthpiece to spread the word on your thoughts and your programs and your efforts here at bringing the state where it needs to be. So congratulations on your election. And I hope we'll talk soon.
All right. Thanks so much. Thanks for having me on.
Dawn Euer, recently elected state senator here in the great state of Rhode Island, replacing Senator Deborah Paiva-Weed. An overwhelming victory. She's got a clear record as a community activist. I look forward to her contributions to the state and providing, and particularly, shall we say, in the case of the Pawtucket Red Sox, a voice of reason. Folks, more to come. Jody Stone is in the green room, if you will. She'll be discussing dyslexia with us, an issue that's very, very important to me on a personal level. She's taken the time to journey up here from the southern climes of Rhode Island. Folks, you are in fact at this very moment in time, this moment in history, like no other in the future of the state of Rhode Island, listening to the Coalition on the Worldwide Coalition Media Network, broadcasting live here at the Go Local Live Media Center, 90 Way Boston Street, in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island, the naked city, the city of 1,000 stories. We've already told 3 stories tonight. There's more to come. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty, mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. CoalitionRadio.us, where you'll find a link to our new YouTube page, where tonight's activities, as well as the last 2 or 3 months or so as we join the Go Local Live family, are all broadcast in full living color. Your chance to relive some of the great moments in Rhode Island political talk. Folks, stay tuned.